Okay, we're going to get started, folks. I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. This is the final in our fall lecture series, which is a collaboration between the London Society of Architects and Museum London. If you're joining us for the first time or you've been with us before, you picked a great night to come because tonight we have one of the greatest architects in Canada that we have right now. Brigitte Shim is a principal in the Toronto-based firm Shim-Sutcliffe Architects. She is also a professor at the John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape and Design at the University of Toronto. Shim, along with her partner Howard Sutcliffe, formed their architectural practice, Shim-Sutcliffe Architects, in 1994, reflecting their shared interest and passion for the integration and interrelated scales of architecture, landscape, and interior design and industrial design. To date, Shim and Sutcliffe have received 13 Governor General's Medals and Awards for Architecture, an American Institute of Architects National Honor Award, along with many other professional accolades for their built work ranging from projects for nonprofit groups to public and private clients. Brigitte has held her position as professor at the John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape and Design at the University of Toronto since 1988. Where she has been engaged in core design studios, advanced design studios, as well as teaching the history and theory of landscape architecture. In addition to this, she has had significant involvement at other major institutions. She is currently the 2014 Eero Saarinen Visiting Professor at Yale University's School of Architecture. Shim and Sutcliffe hold the 2014 University of Auckland Distinguished Visitors Award at their School of Architecture and Planning in the National Institute for Creative Arts and Industries. She has also held the Eero Saarinen Visiting Professorship in the years of 2005 and 2010, the William B. and Charlotte Shepard Davenport Visiting Professorship in the year of 2008, the Henry Bishop Visiting Chair, and the Visiting Bicentennial Professor in Canadian Studies in 2001, an invited international visiting professorship at École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne in 2002, and Harvard University's Graduate School of Design in 1993 and 1996, as well as the Somerville Visiting Lectureship at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Environmental Design in 2013, and the Martel Distinguished Visiting Critic at the University of Buffalo School of Architecture and Planning in 2006. That's a lot. Brigitte Shim has lectured on Shim-Sutcliffe's built work and participated in invited international symposia around the world. Shim is a current member of the Toronto's Waterfront Design Review Committee, the University of Toronto's Design Review Committee, and has served on Canada's National Capital Commission Architectural Advisory Board for more than a decade. She has served on numerous international, national, and local design juries as an advocate for design excellence, including the 2007 Aga Khan Architecture Award Master Jury. She was board member of Build Toronto, the Real Estate and Development Corporation, created to generate value from the city's real estate assets, and Moorlands Community Services, a local nonprofit charity helping inner-city children and youth affected by poverty since 1917. She is a senior fellow at Massey College in the University of Toronto and their college architect. Brigitte Shim is a fellow of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, an honorary fellow of the American Institute of Architects, and an elected member of the Royal Canadian Academy. In January 2013, Brigitte Shim and her partner Howard Sutcliffe were both awarded the Order of Canada, in quotes, for their contributions as architects designing sophisticated structures that represent the best of Canadian design to the world, along with the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. On a personal note, while I was studying at the University of Toronto, I had the honor, I went into my 5th year thesis year where you get to choose who you're going to have as your professor. For me, it was a slam dunk when I saw Brigitte's name. To finish off university, having her as your advisor was an honor. So she passed me. So tonight I get the pleasure of introducing Brigitte, and I'd just like to have everyone give her a warm welcome to Brigitte Shim.
Hello. Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it, and it's really a pleasure to be back in this room because I actually gave a lecture here 15 years ago. I was invited by Linda Stefano, and it was another sort of architecture lecture series, and so it's really a pleasure to return to London. And in a way, it was just really great to see James and to when you're a teacher, you actually see a lot of students, and to see them really come into their own and to be really contributing and doing great architecture is such an honor and a pleasure. I also want to thank the kind of group that put this together, because I know how hard it is to give a lecture when there's no architecture school. You have to figure out who you're going to invite, you have to get all the money, you have to do all the advertising, and it really takes a lot of collective effort and energy to pull a series together, and it's really great that you have a series that's been going for a few years, and really, I'm really truly delighted to contribute. So here we go. What I wanted to do is to begin by talking about some issues that really are important to us. Light and water and the kind of role of building and landscape. And what I wanted to do is to use some of our earlier projects to kind of explain and sort of illustrate these things that are really passionate and important for Howard and I, and then to share with you some really current work. So maybe 6 projects that you may or may not have seen that haven't really been fully published all over, and so you'll see work that I think is just sort of maybe newer than has been published already. So that's kind of the way I'm going to just structure the talk. And so this is one of the projects that I'll show you in more detail later on, and I'll circle back to it. But I wanted to really begin by talking about light. We are at 43 degrees latitude, so light is a really important dimension for everything that we do as architects. And so really from our earliest projects, and this project was done in 1992, 93, light has been something that we think about a lot. We need to amplify light in the winter, we need to shade and protect ourselves in the summer, but architects have to think about how to really celebrate light. It's free, first of all, and it's also something that really marks where you are as a place in the world, and is something that we've been exploring and experimenting with in many different ways. In all of our projects, the reflected ceiling plan is one of the most important things, and in many projects and offices, it's kind of like where you put all the stuff you don't know how to figure out, the exit signs, the smoke detectors, all that stuff, and we really work at really making the ceiling an active participant in the spatial definition of our work, and light is always a part of that. The image up here is a kind of really recent project. It's on a site we've been working on for 30 years. So we have our first project is actually our most current project. And this is an homage to the Toronto Ravines. So in this site, you don't see it here, but in the landscape there is a kind of what I call a remnant ravine, a piece of a much larger ravine system, the Carolinian Forest, which stretches all the way to Florida, and the Toronto ravine system is the most northerly tip of this extensive system of very unique trees and sort of ecology. And in this backyard is a kind of remnant ravine that has honey locust and black locust trees and walnut trees, and the black locust trees are over 150 years old. So this kind of amazing species that really you wouldn't think of in our climatic zone. So this is actually an interior space, but you're looking out to the exterior, and it's actually water jet cut steel that is actually the leaf pattern of a black locust. So really celebrating the specificity of the place. This is a synagogue we did in Portland, Maine, but we're actually looking at a combination of a skylight and a clear story that we developed, a kind of combined hybrid condition. And through it, you actually get to amplify the light that comes into the sacred space. And in Maine, they're kind of shipbuilders, and every building is a clapboard building. And so what we did on the interior was we reversed the clapboard. So they thought we were a little crazy. What, don't these guys know how to detail things? What's going on? So instead of shadows of light, we actually created lines of light. And so when the light falls on this, you actually really see the kind of, and make palpable the light conditions. And we really wanted to have that as part of the experience. An early project, Moorlands Camp, a dining hall for a camp for inner city kids. And really we're working with light again. We're using 2x4s, so right down the middle. It's a very elemental, very basic building material. And above it is a greenhouse glazing, a very ordinary, off-the-shelf greenhouse skylight that they use for large industrial greenhouses. It provides natural light, but also it's motorized and does ventilation. So it really was really something that we felt was a ready-made piece that was incorporated into an architectural element, large glulam frames, steel rods. So the guys on site said it was like tuning a violin when they were putting the structure together, because it was sort of like coming together, and the hybrid of the steel and the wood together created the kind of structural system for the dining hall, which is where the kids have 3 meals a day during the whole camp season. A very modest project in scale and budget, but really again about light. This is the Craven Road studio, where we're working with a very skinny skylight at the edge above a kind of 8-foot datum, and using it with different depths of thickness of the wall in this upper zone of birch plywood to really illuminate and create light. And in this space, it's for an archivist who didn't want to have any glaring light. It creates this kind of even light condition, a place for display, a working reference library, and that also has a ceiling that has nothing on it. So really working and even with a very small space to really amplify the light and explore the light. And then the next sort of big category for us is winter. So Howard was born in Yorkshire, England, and I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. So we're really Canadian. And our family arrived from Kingston in February in the middle of a snowstorm. So my memory and my image of Canada is very vivid and really connected to winter storms. And so when we actually design, we think about winter. We think about what our projects will look like in a snowstorm. And we drive our photographers crazy because we actually want them to shoot in a snowstorm, and they're not so keen because of all their camera equipment. So, so we always end up with these long conversations about how great it is to go out in the snow. A very early project that we did in Slabtown, at the south end of Georgian Bay, a kind of tower, but also we're thinking about the outside looking in, but also the inside looking out. So we really placed the kitchen sink really in line with the kind of rows of the orchard so that you felt like you were in that place. And in a way, I think winter is a long season, and I think in Canada, if we don't celebrate it and really make it part of how we see our architecture, I think we're really missing out a lot. Another project called the Weathering Steel House, where we're combining rusting steel and Douglas fir, but also the kind of winter condition becomes really important for us. And we not only think again about the outside looking in, but we also think very carefully about what it's like from the inside looking out. So this kind of question of the foreground and the different scales and relationships of the background and how you place yourself in that is also very, very important to both Howard and I. Another really small project. So many of the projects we've received Governor General's medals for, some are like up to 150,000 square feet, but some are actually under 500 square feet. So we really are kind of a very eclectic practice in that we don't really distinguish between scale or budget. We just like working on stuff. And we actually think anything can be kind of design. So this is actually 500 square feet. It was a kind of cedar shack pool house that with a kidney-shaped swimming pool. And we kind of worked with the existing foundations and created something new. And here we're experimenting, and in a way, these next few projects really talk about the interlocking of building and landscape. So we're always thinking about both a building as an object, but also a building as literally connected to its landscape. So here, the kidney-shaped pool, we reshaped and interlocked. We eroded pieces of the project to create outdoor covered spaces, and then we used things like profilate glass to create a kind of lantern-like condition. We also think again about the inside looking out. And really in our climatic zone, which is plus 40 to minus 40, you're always having to struggle with envelope issues and really trying to make it look effortless, but it really requires a lot of hard work. And so we wanted this openness and transparency in the summer, and the, the glass behind the fireplace is actually a fire glass that's a ceramic frit. So you can have a fire and watch it snow behind you in the winter. And then there's a whole other scale, the scale of furniture and fittings that Howard and I have always been interested in. And so this is actually called the Hab chair. It's actually manufactured and distributed by Neon Camper. And it was a kind of one of several chairs that we've been developing in the studio. And next to it is what we call the bug lamp. Again, experiments really inspired by fireflies in a jar, stuff you do when you're a kid, and developing it with a kind of series of organic shapes that you see inside, and that those shapes are actually embedded with a phosphorescent powder. So like fireflies, you turn the light off and then it glows. And we've actually been kind of developing this lamp for a while. So. And at the same time, we actually have been working on a lot of hardware, fittings, so door handles, kind of window extensions, things that are really part of almost the language of industrial design that we're really interested in. So here at the top, you can see that it starts from a clay, paper, and then at the very far right are 3D printouts that become the cast for a custom door handle. And now we're actually doing a lot of work with literally 3D printouts in metal. So we're actually able to do fittings as one-off pieces in bronze that can be a custom door handle, a custom light, and amazing technology and possibilities. So we really love tinkering and playing with all this stuff because it, again, creates a specificity to projects. Alvar Aalto called the kind of door handle the first handshake when you enter a building. And in a way, that whole scale of kind of and level of detail is of interest to us because it really, again, creates a particular architecture as opposed to a generic one. And then water. We love working with water. We love working with water in public projects and private projects. We have a few projects where there's no water, but wherever we can do it, we just think it's really a kind of element that really somehow amplifies our relationship to nature and makes you very aware of these subtle shifts and changes through the summer season, but in particular the winter season. So in a way, the last image was Ledbury Park in the summer, and this is actually Ledbury Park in the winter, where again, winter water has again a magical quality. And there's a kind of outdoor water element that's right next to a public skating rink. And so you get the frozen water and then the moving water. One of our earliest projects, a garden pavilion, where again, we're interlocking water and we're using it in a very purposeful way. You have a kind of water element, a kind of trough, and then a reflecting pool next to a Toronto ravine. And then in a way, this is an image of the same project taken 20 years later. And we're always thinking about our work and saying, does it make a good ruin? What would it look like as a ruin? And thinking about it as this kind of, not as this kind of pristine, finished thing, but actually thinking about what happens when nature interacts with it, when you actually have moss and patina, because in a way, buildings are not perfect, and they're also not, the whole issue of accepting the elements and their aging actually becomes, I think, part of what their reality. And so we actually almost try to build that into the way we think about the projects. So we imagine them more like this 20 years from now, with overgrown and and actually occupied and then used and in effect engaged with nature. So for us, those are really important issues. This is another project in the Thousand Islands where, in effect, the reflecting pool and water garden is almost as big as the house. So we actually, our clients wanted a screened-in porch, so we created a cubic volume surrounded by water, lots of insect screens, but the whole thing opens up, and that in so many parts of the house, you're so proximate to the reflecting pool. And so what you're seeing in the image is actually the reflection of the water lilies on the ceiling of the dining room. And this kind of relationship is actually very much part of your daily experience. And then working with natural native species and really creating, in effect, a kind of water condition that is really a garden in itself. And so in this project, we designed all of the landscaping, worked with native perennials, on the land side, and then native water plants in the water itself. So creating very different ecologies and working with local species to be able to do that. So now, so in a way, those are some of the issues that really matter to us. The role of water, the kind of question of light, the kind of play of winter, and then this interlocking of building and landscape. And so I just wanted to kind of maybe describe those through a few sort of selected projects as themes that actually occupy all of the work that we do. And so what I want to do is just show you some really current projects that have been published. I guess one of the things that happens to us is that all of our work is published all over the world and actually very rarely published in Canadian magazines. And so in a way, it's a bit kind of odd that we live in Toronto, but in a way, we're very much kind of slightly under the radar in terms of publications in our own backyard. Maybe that happens a lot all over the place. The projects I selected to share with you are not only more current, but they also have another theme to them. And for me, they're really about this ambiguity between inside and outside. Something that is really inside, but you feel like you've actually entered an outside space. And in a way, this sort of kind of indeterminacy of in and out is something that Howard and I are very interested in. And we play with a lot in our architecture because we actually want you to kind of feel and experience space. And so this is a project in Frank Gehry's Art Gallery of Ontario. It's the African Collection, which is the permanent installation, and it was designed by us within the kind of larger Gehry project. One of our clients, Murray Frum, donated over 90 pieces to the Art Gallery of Ontario. And he asked us to do the permanent installation of this collection. And here's an image of the opening, so there are lots of drums and big kind of performance. And if you were to enter the art gallery, it would sort of look like this. Actually, maybe I'll go one forward. If you were in other parts of the gallery, you might see and glimpse something like this. And then you would actually then walk to see a portal. And here you actually have an opening that actually connects and gives you a hint of a space beyond. So you're looking at a kind of very open condition. So if you were to put your hand through that opening, probably lots of alarms would go off. But you're actually visually connected, and you're actually not, there's no glass between the two layers. And so what we ended up doing was creating, in effect, 4 of these portals. We worked with a curator, a special guest curator of the African collection, and he identified 4 or 5 really special pieces in the collection that were extremely three-dimensional and really warranted being able to be viewed both from the front and the back. And then there were other pieces in the collection that were smaller, that really couldn't be displayed in that way, and really had to be under casework just for security reasons and conservation reasons. And in all of these gallery projects, you're working with such a large team of the security guys that don't want anything to happen to anything, and so they want it just to be in a vault. And then the conservators, who are all concerned about light quality, and then the graphics people that are worried about how large the typeface is so that visually impaired can see everything. And so you're really juggling these multiple agendas. So here we are in what we call the perimeter gallery that wraps around the exterior. And here you can see one of the portals on the right, the white sort of large cutout, and then one of the 4 openings into what we call the inner gallery. So again, this idea of inside and outside is that you're in the Art Gallery of Ontario. You know you're not in an outdoor space. It's a big, huge kind of gallery, but you, in effect, go from, the perimeter gallery into this inner, what we feel like is a courtyard. And so we have a wood floor, a wooden table, and you can see these portals from the back side, and the entire inner room is lined with etched glass that's illuminated inside. So it's actually a wall of light that in effect provides the backdrop to view the best pieces in the collection. And so there are these really large, almost human-sized pieces that are magnificent. And we didn't want to end up in a situation where we would have to put them in a plexiglass case, almost as if they were trapped or contained. And so we worked really hard with the curators to create a large table that met all of their dimensions for security and for safety, but allowed you to read not only the object, but the space between the objects. And then here you can see those portals allowing you to view the back side of these pieces that you saw from the other side when you were walking around the perimeter gallery. So here's another detail within it. Again, we're thinking about the ceiling and the walls and the floors, and really the feeling that you've actually kind of left the big Art Gallery of Ontario and entered, in effect, what feels like a courtyard. And another view. And so in a way, this kind of inside-outside feeling was really a kind of something we were trying to achieve in this project. And now we're going to kind of shift quite a long way away to Hong Kong. And in a way, a lot of our earlier work was really in Toronto or within a 3-hour drive of Toronto. Stratford, we've done projects in Muskoka, in Halliburton, the Thousand Islands, and recently, so we still have projects in the Toronto area, and lots of things under construction, but we've been doing work in Hong Kong and Hawaii and Moscow, so really different places, very different climatic zones, but also really interesting for us to explore other places and different ways of building and constructing. So this is a project in Hong Kong. Causeway Bay is where all the Chinese love to eat and shop. And our client bought 3 floors of an existing office building. Luckily, it was the top 3 floors because the only way we could get some of these pieces into the building was to put a gantry on the roof of the building. They closed off streets at midnight, brought things up the entire exterior of the building, almost like by, so it wasn't a crane, it was a gantry that was set up to kind of bring things up and then bring everything down the exit stair to the 30th floor so it could be kind of used in the project. And that went for the artwork, for all the construction elements, because the elevators were so small, and then also, things like Renaissance fireplaces and other pieces of the project. So here we are on the top floor, and it's an existing office building, so whenever you see these wooden fins, they're actually lined up with the mullions of the existing 1980s buildings. So we're really working with the cadence of the existing curtain wall, their views of the harbor in Hong Kong, and what you're seeing is a very small floor plate of what is a kind of small office building. And so what we ended up doing is working to really create a kind of clean ceiling that again has no exit signs, no sprinklers, no nothing, and then developed a lighting detail with LED lights that actually illuminated one of the main hanging walls. There's a Damien Hirst on the right and a Nish Kapoor, this kind of shaped piece. And then the entire floor is an artwork. You're thinking, is that a carpet? What's going on? It looks a little racy for these guys, but it's actually an art installation. An artist named Jim Lambie, and it's all metallic tape. And so it's actually the art piece that dominates most of the space. Here's a view from the other end, and again, you're looking at the staircase, the bronze wall further on, and then this fully illuminated hanging wall with these LED lights that actually shine. There's 2 layers of lights that shine in different directions to create the right cone and perfectly illuminates the entire wall. And then on the right, you're seeing these wooden fins and then the actual curtain wall of the existing building. So at the bottom of the stair, you're also seeing the art piece. There's an art foundation, so there's offices there. I think this was published about a year ago in Architectural Record Interiors. Here you are at the top, and you're also seeing this crazy art floor. And the entire staircase for 3 floors is also the same art piece. So it is kind of a different experience. And so we actually created an oak stair that brings you up through the center, connecting all these spaces. And then we also use bronze on the side walls. And then at the entry, you enter in the middle floor, and we actually designed a bronze reception desk that's all shaped bronze. Everything was actually built in mainland China in an enormous factory, actually built and assembled, disassembled, crated, and then brought to the site. Our client's office, where we actually used the floor and the ceiling are the same American walnut, really wide planks. And here's a view of the harbor and the mountain in Hong Kong. And again, a series of bronze panels for the backdrop. And then a lot of the smaller spaces we designed almost like being in a ship. So this is service elevators and washrooms. And then again, our interest, custom lights that actually were part of the project itself. So being able to almost treat it almost like you're designing things in a boat. So now another leap this is one of Patterson Ewan's amazing pieces. And in a way, one of the things that we love about his work is the connection to the elements. And we're really inspired by working with Patterson a while ago before he passed away. And in a way, this is a project in Georgian Bay and really connected to the elements. And the project really begins by this kind of understanding this amazing landscape, this Precambrian rock scraped after the last ice age, and this kind of color palette. This is actually a photograph taken by our son Simon of Georgian Bay in a rainstorm. And you're really seeing the kind of color palette and the kind of elements that are really part of this incredible place. So our project is a very personal project because it was designed for ourselves and is really a kind of we wanted it to be a wooden tent. And so here's a very early sketch of it sort of feeling quite fragile, not so heavy, and very much connected to the elements. We also wanted it to feel like a porch. And so here's an early drawing where you can see it almost more open than closed and very much accepting the elements as they come along. And we also build lots of models. So here you're actually seeing a study model, and you're thinking of the kind of, we were developing something that really began with the Moorlands Camp Dining Hall, but extending it further, and really studying the way light comes into the space, and really wanting the space to actually be very dark, so that in effect it could feel, we could create more contrast between the light and the dark. Also, it had to be built on an island, so it was very much a kit of parts. We thought about how it meets the ground, so we actually used scaffolding screw jacks for the base of scaffolding to actually be how we supported the building, so that we were very much as light as possible on the ground. And then it could be adjusted to create our sort of framework, our sort of base structure. And we actually knew both the weight and how much there was of every single element in the entire project. And then also for us, on the right is the floor plan, but on the left is the reflected ceiling plan. So as I said earlier in the introduction, for us a reflected ceiling plan is one of the most important drawings because it describes the spatial experience of the project as opposed to just being where you put all the stuff you don't know how to figure out where to go. And then because it was built on an island, everything also had to be light. If two guys couldn't carry it over a rugged, rocky landscape, forget it. No equipment, no cranes, no kind of mechanical devices to put it together. So really an interesting design challenge to think about, not just the design, what you want it to be like, but how it needs to be constructed in the most elemental way to be able to be put on a remote location. And so here we are doing drawings and really kind of not only doing that, but actually building full-size mock-ups of a structural bay so that we really knew what was going on. We worked really directly with our structural engineers, so we actually got them to come to the shop to check out the prototype and sign off on the structure from this. And part of our goal was to say, but can't we do it lighter than this? Can't we make it thinner than this? And then, so we just worked back and forth to really shape it to make sure that there was nothing superfluous or extra on the project. And then a bit like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, this is more like a dock with an outboard motor on it. That was how we delivered most of the things to the site from the guys at the local marina. But we actually worked with SIPS panels, so structurally insulated panels, fully insulated. They built all of this stuff in a controlled millwork shop over the winter. Very little wastage, really precise because they were working indoors, really skilled guys, and they could really, literally kind of put together the kit of parts in a shop, bring it to the site to really create the project itself. So really we're thinking about prefabrication, but maybe in a different way than just a big flatbed trailer coming to the site and then putting a couple of, kind of long, skinny buildings in place. So it's a different approach that really was responding to the specificity of the place. The roof is Corten steel. You have these all these openings that open up in the middle. And then this pretty amazing post-glacial landscape, a kind of mini archipelagos within an archipelagos of 30,000 islands. So this kind of very special landscape that we're in. And then here you're seeing the kind of interior where you're seeing the kind of darker wood that's shaped because, again, it's all built in a shop. They have all the tools, all the equipment, a kind of skylight down the middle that's made up of steel that really is light and very rugged and durable, and then a dark floor, and then on the right, the kind of opening up. And we just finished a publication that's part of a Dalhousie Press series. It's called Documents in Canadian Architecture. And this is a series that has some really great architects, John and Pat Patkow and Brian McKay Lyons. And in a way, it's really geared to students because it's a university press. And they've been bugging us for such a long time to do something, and we were a bit slow. And so what we actually decided to do is to really connect to students. And so there's an interview, but we actually show two projects. We actually show a house in a laneway that we did 20 years ago, and this project in Georgian Bay, which are very personal projects. They're really experimental because they were done for ourselves, and we actually show sketches and context and process as well as the finished thing, but we actually think that often students are disconnected from how you get from the image in the magazine. They see the image in the magazine but don't know how to get from A to B. And we really wanted to kind of describe the kind of design process that we went through in a very urban urban, very dense project in a back alley to a project in the Canadian landscape. So this just came out, so maybe you might want to buy it for someone for Christmas. But it was really a kind of experiment for us that we wanted to share. So again, so what you're seeing is in effect the kind of details of where the dark wood actually meets the light and the way that you frame views of the forest, and then the integration of these elements like the fireplace, the role of light entering the project. So many of the themes that were really addressed at the outset that really are explored in different ways in many projects you're actually seeing in this specific project. Here's the kitchen where you can see the kind of development of the corner window. We actually use insect screen to kind of create a folded insect screen corner. And so again, experimenting with all these elements of the vernacular. If you don't have insect screen, you're in really big trouble up here. It's really not worth going up. And so wanting then to find ways to integrate it into the architecture. Again, using a kind of fiberglass, double skin for the kind of top of the greenhouse glazing, so that if a pine tree falls in the winter, it's all very durable and really tough. And then all of this opens up. There's a kind of crank, very manual, a simple manual crank that opens everything up and ventilates as well as bringing light in. So again, really thinking through these kind of ready-made pieces and incorporating them into the architecture. And then a whole series of screens, so insect screens, clear glass, and then on the left-hand side, you're seeing fiberglass. So depending on the prevailing winds and the kind of day, you're always moving and adjusting the screens to really feel more like a porch and more connected to nature. So here's a view from the inside looking out, and then a view of the same project from the outside looking in. And again, this inside out and the oscillation between the two is something that interests us in many of the projects that we work on. So we'll shift again. This is a very recent project. I think it's only been published in one or two places. I think it was published in Wallpaper magazine and a few other places. And it's an existing house on the edge of a Toronto ravine. And we've really been so fortunate to have been able to build on a lot of almost like West Coast sites in Toronto. So most people think of Toronto as this really flat city, which it pretty much is. But these river valleys, the ravine system is this unique ecology within the city. And that we've been fortunate to be at the edge of many of these, which means we have to deal with the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority and Top of Bank and geotechnical engineers and a lot of things that are really a pain in the butt. But at the same time, there are also really amazing opportunities for topography and to really connect to this kind of undulating landscape. So here's a view from the street where you're seeing a glimpse of the house right through there. And then we're actually working with a combination of Corten steel and then powder-coated enamel as part of the exterior of the project. We retained as many of the trees of the existing landscape to really ensure that they were protected during the construction to make them part of the new composition. Here's the entry, so you're actually walking along this long entry condition with a fountain on the right. And again, we're really developing the landscape concept, working with native species, creating foregrounds and middle grounds, and then the background of the existing landscape itself. Creating bridges that cross over different kinds of pools. So this one has a whole water ecology in it of fish and snapping turtles that are part of the design. Crossing into the main space of the project, descending down into it. So many of the projects we've been working on, are all geothermal, in-floor hot water heating, so the geothermal for heating and cooling and green roofs, and really integrating all of those into the spatial experience of the project. And here you are in the main space looking back to the garden that you came through. And then here, we're using these very deep fins to protect you from a kind of neighbor condition on the other side, where you're really only reading the light passing through, and really amplifying the light through the architecture. So again, like the discussion at the very beginning, really finding ways to make light part of everyday experience in all of our projects. So here it's coming from the side through these deep fins, and then in this view it's coming from up above with skylights that are much higher up, coming down and washing the face of the fireplace. Views from the dining area looking out to the ravine and this entry sequence. We like fireplaces. We do lots of really big, huge fireplaces, several double flues. So the same dining room, living room fireplace is connected to the dining room fireplace, and they're back-to-back flues that create a kind of mass in the center of the house that also works structurally and then also works for washing light. And then on the same site, a full floor below the kind of street level is actually a pool house. So we're kind of coming down the slope of the ravine and creating this kind of almost like a cottage in your own backyard. So we're using steel, Corten steel, covered outdoor spaces, rear projection screens, so you can actually be in the pool and watch a hockey game. It's pretty good. And, really following the kind of terrace slope of the ravine, a full wooden deck around it. And again, the site, we also designed a fire pit, and then it continues down to actually stairs that take you to the bottom of the ravine. So this kind of amazing section that continues further. This next project, I thought I would show in a bit more detail because it's such a unique project. It's called the Integral House, and we've worked on it for quite some time, and these are the music stands that we designed for the project. A very early sketch. So we worked with a remarkable person named James Stewart, who is a mathematician and a concert violinist. So it sounds like a first-year architecture student program. A house for a mathematician, concert violinist, steep slope. Part of the program was curves, not just a line that's a curve, but a curve, a volumetric curve, because of his love of calculus. It had also to have a concert hall for 150 to 200 people in the living room, and also had to be architecturally significant. He was going to have an architectural competition, and he interviewed everyone from Frank Gehry, all kinds of different people, and we were very fortunate to end up working on the project. And so I just want to maybe describe more of the journey. So it begins with a sketch that's quite ephemeral. You're trying to figure stuff out. In our studio, we work with lots of models. They're never fancy models. They're always study models. We think of ourselves as sketching with models. So here you're looking at, chipboard and tracing paper, and so very kind of basic, but really very much part of informing us as well as our clients about what we're thinking about. Models of different scales. We never work with model builders. We do everything in-house because it's really part of how we think. We also need to work and study things in other ways. So here we are looking at this kind of, what we call like a wooden curtain opening up to the ravine. And so we're studying the kind of density, the kind of different locations, and we're kind of thinking through the kind of design through these studies and collages. So we work 3D and then more in sort of through drawings. And then we work with a lot of computer technology. So there are 97 different thicker fins, and then there's a more standardized fin. And so here's a drawing of all the 97 different versions. And then you're seeing them, they're all numbered. So guys would actually work with the digital files and then build these pieces and then fit them on site and then bring them back. So again, it's a kind of hybrid condition of really high tech, but then people actually have to build it. And so somewhere oscillating between the two. Here's actually our standard, these deeper fins where you're actually seeing in effect the shaping of them. And what's kind of ironic is in this house that's all about curves, there's actually no curving glass. So it's actually really straight glass, but the illusion of curves is actually created. When we actually bid out the fins, we had every contractor who bid on it actually build a fin. And it was amazing. Same set of drawings. It was incredible how totally different they looked. So it's kind of interesting to think about the kind of way that the same, sort of drawn lines results in very different built things. And so we were able to compare the drawings to the different fins and pick the one that was, that we felt understood the way of making it the best. And then here's the more standardized fin. Here it is as a construction drawing. So you can see the epay cap on the top, the double glazed sealed unit, the shaped fin that's both structural and then becomes part of the interior experience. And then every fourth fin is asymmetrically loaded from the top to the bottom. So we made our structural engineers work really hard to kind of figure out the whole thing. And here's a full-size mock-up of one of the fins. And then here's a view of one of those standardized fins that is in contrast to the 97 different fins that exist at one level. So then we also built bigger models, really helping us figure out the interior of the room, the fire. So the big chunk on the right-hand side are 3 fireplaces that are stacked. On the left-hand side is an elevator that goes all 5 floors, and then shaped balconies and railings, and then this denser level of these deeper fins, and then the other more regular standardized fins below. And then here's an aerial view, so again, models really helping us. So what I wanted to do is 2 things. One, to show you the house as part of a performance experience, a more theatrical experience, and then it as a regular, not regular, but a kind of domestic space. So, so this is actually the New Orford Quartet actually doing a rehearsal in the space before they actually do their performance. So there's about a couple guys, they're checking out the sound, they're actually figuring out the lighting, they're trying to make sure they know what it feels like, and moving their chairs around so they're in the right place. And then the evening of the performance, the performers arrive, the kind of meet and greet. So what's interesting is that there have been a whole range of different concerts here, some that have been orchestrated by Jim Stewart and others that are for fundraisers for all kinds of arts groups. And Jim's view is that small arts groups need money, but they also need to make friends. And so by using this as a venue, it actually builds their audience as well as allows them to kind of earn funds that can help them in different ways. And so it's been a kind of amazing gift to the cultural community in Toronto. And so in a way, it's interesting to imagine how a domestic space can be used for a kind of another purpose. So here you are, people coming and arriving, and this backdrop against the kind of Toronto ravine. So depending on this time of year and the season, it is a very different experience because of the landscape itself. Here are these shaped edge conditions. So we're using leather and bronze and white oak, shaped columns that become part of the structural system. And then again, the silhouette or ongoing relationship to the ravine itself. And then it's getting closer to performance time, and everyone's getting ready. They're kind of, and so in a way, there's a certain theatricality to the experience of the stairs. There have actually been events with dinner and concerts, a lot of logistics. And then again, this kind of gathering together. And what's really amazing is, unlike a kind of concert hall where the performers are on a stage, you actually are at the same level with them. You can see them sweat, you can watch, you can hear them turning the page. Sometimes you can hear them all breathing in at exactly the same time. So it's actually kind of a different experience, which is really, chamber music started off in living rooms, the whole idea of the salon, and this kind of amplifies it to a bigger scale. Also, they're really great places at the upper level as well as the lower level. So the balconies of the dining room and the living room act as kind of parts of the performance itself. So here we are at the end, and so you really get a sense of the kind of re-inhabitation of the space for these special events. And there have been a huge range of different things. This is the Cabbagetown Boys and Girls Club, where different kids from the kind of community are playing. This is actually Philip Glass, who did a private concert for Illuminato, totally amazing, to hear his music in the space itself, and they did an interview with him afterwards. The St. Lawrence String Quartet at the opening concert, and there was a special composer, Rodney Sharman, who did a piece for them. This is Steve Reich with Nexus, so again, amazing world presentation of one of his compositions. A modern dance company called Zumata, who actually used the space in a very different way for contemporary dance. And then 4 musicians from the Simon Bolivar Orchestra. This is a group from Venezuela who are, there's an amazing man named Dr. Abreu who developed El Sistema, bringing kids out of poverty through music. And so there was a very special concert for the United Way and the Glenn Gould Foundation, really celebrating this, this group. I think they brought 200 musicians from Venezuela, and they picked the 4 best to play in the space. Cabaret, so really kind of other kind of prod music. Aldenburg Connection with sound and piano. So really this kind of amazing understanding of it as a performance space. Thought it would be good to see some architectural drawings. So here you're seeing the section from the street at the top, and the section line actually continues off the page. So we're not even at the bottom of the ravine. So you can see this topographic condition and the way the house literally steps down the ravine. A cross section, so you can see the way you descend from the kind of main entry level down. So I'm not sure if, is this a pointer? Oh, your mic. Oh, sorry. Sorry, it's your microphone. Okay. So don't worry about it. It's okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. So in a way, this is the level that you enter at, and you come down a full level to the performance level, and down further to a study and gallery, and down further to a pool level. And then the bedrooms are actually up here. So the project literally goes from the treetops to the base of the tree, literally almost like five stories. So here we are at the lower level. There's a kind of terrace, pool, and wellness area. There's a study gallery area and a large green roof. There's actually the main performance space, living room with back of house, and the upper level where you enter, and the upper level living room and dining room and kitchen. So here it is in a Toronto ravine. You can see the CN Tower over here. And this is a view in February, and it literally almost becomes part of the slope of the ravine. So you're actually seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories here. And then this is a view from Roxborough where you're entering and you're seeing it as a 2-story project. So the shift between the entry, which is 2 stories, so this is actually the top level, this is the entry level, and then we're actually 3 floors below in the ravine. And then you enter, and there's a kind of blue glass stair, which we designed as part of the project, and you catch glimpses of it at the entry. Custom furniture pieces that we designed where we're folding steel and covering it with industrial felt. The entry that you saw as part of the bigger performance, where you're looking at the leather-covered edges, white oak, and the shaped columns. And here we are at what we call this upper level with these deeper, thicker fins. This is the dining room space here, where you're also seeing these deeper fins. Custom dining room tables that we designed where the lights shine up from below, and these are all bronze elements set into plastic laminate. This is the kitchen, and details of the kitchen with some of a version of our bug lamps that we designed. And then again, glimpses of this blue glass stair, this kind of enigmatic element that is in the center of the project. You see it from the outside before you occupy it. Then pieces of the living room space. So these are those shaped balconies that have an upper level living room, the lower level living space. This is the deeper fins where there's a whole bunch of different versions, and this is the more standardized fin. So what we wanted is to make you feel as if you've been in a Toronto ravine and you've never had to step outside. So again, this inside-outside thing. We're bringing the outside in, and then we're pushing the inside out. So here's the top of the stair at the entry level before you descend down. And then we're working with bronze, stainless steel mesh, and leather, and shaping them as part of your journey. This is actually our client up here, and for scale, and you're seeing in effect this wooden curtain that opens up to the ravine. And it's been really interesting to have so many different events in the space, and I would say many of the musicians have described the experience of the space as actually like being in an instrument. So they kind of are inhabiting the interior of the instrument, and the acoustics have actually, luckily for us, been pretty amazing. So the resonance and the kind of warmth of the space really has been something the musicians have really enjoyed. And then views looking back, you're looking at the stair. This is the concrete element with the fireplaces. There's 1, 2, 3 fireplaces stacked. The kitchen, the upper level dining room, and then the family room below. And then being in the kind of underside of the lower level dining room looking out. And then here looking across the space. And again, the seasons really contribute to a very different spatial experience. So here you're looking back at the kind of lower and upper level living spaces. And again, the kind of different ways of inhabiting the space. And then really working with limestone and bronze and white oak as part of the material palette. And descending down to the next level. And at this stage, there's actually a study, and so here you can see the green roof and the kind of landscape beyond. And then descending to the final lowest level and framing views of the landscape. The pool, which is a kind of, there's a 35-foot long wall that descends into the ground, so when you want to be outside, you're really outside. And then the blue glass stair. So it's actually a very private stair that connects you from the kitchen to the upper level bedrooms. And it's actually a series of hand-blown blue glass that are supported on stainless steel cables. And the treads of the stair are glass that bring light all the way down to another stair below it. And so you're looking at a kind of lay light, a kind of that filters the light, a poured-in-place concrete wall, the stair treads of glass, and then the blue glass stair. So you're seeing the top of the stair, and then you're looking at the outside of the stair. Again, we saw it in different places, but you can see the stainless steel cables, the cast bronze clips that kind of support the stair itself. So the idea that you can be in the stair, but you can also experience it from the outside, so this inside-outside condition. So the last project that I thought I would show you is a project for a group of Catholic nuns. And the sisters actually saw the integral house under construction, and they loved it. And they actually loved the way that it was curvilinear and the fact that it responded to the landscape itself. So the Sisters of St. Joseph of Toronto, there's a Sisters of St. Joseph in London and Hamilton, and they're a remarkable group of women who came to Toronto in the 1850s. They built 3 of the major hospitals, St. Joseph's, St. Mike's, and Providence Center. They shaped much of Catholic education in Toronto. One of the Sisters of St. Joseph founded the Daily Bread Food Bank. Another sister founded the Furniture Bank. So these are pretty amazing women, and they are downsizing. So like many religious groups and groups of religious women, there are no new nuns coming in. And so they wanted to create for themselves a new home. And our process was pretty amazing because it started off with a mission statement. So we worked together to create the project mission statement, which guided all of our actions through the process. And so what we have is the Don Valley Parkway here, traffic bumper to bumper. This is East York, so the downtown is sort of somewhere over here. East York, this is actually a street called Broadview, and this is O'Connor. And this is actually what's called the Taylor House. So it's an 1858 house, and the owners of the house owned the brickworks, where the Evergreen Brickworks is now, and Todmorden Mills. So they really were shaping Toronto. The house itself had fallen into disrepair, and the first thing the sisters said is, can we move it? Can we just have it go somewhere else? And I thought this was not such a great idea because it was the only heritage house in all of East York. And I didn't think it was a great idea to kind of, it was something that needed help. It needed loving care, but for the sisters, it didn't really mean that much to them. So we spent about a year trying to figure out how to retain the house and actually make it part of a much larger complex. And I think that now, I would say they're very proud of the house. We worked with ERA Architects, who are our heritage architects, to really make the new and the old part of a new complex itself. So here's the plan itself. So you can actually see the Taylor House over here, the main floor, the chapel, dining halls, and then all of the service. There's actually a whole a parking area for staff parking, a drop-off, and there are 63 geothermal pipes that go 400-odd feet into the ground that do the heating and cooling for the entire complex. And one of the things we did is we worked with the sisters to really make it as green as possible, but we also decided that we were beyond leads. So we weren't interested in collecting points and all of that, and the sisters wanted just to do the right thing. And I think, I'm not quite sure whether this would be like a gold or platinum building, but it really wasn't, the kind of marketing aspect of leads was not a driver for the project. And so here you're seeing it with the Don Valley, the kind of the bike paths, the East York neighborhood. You can see the Taylor House, and you can see we actually did PV panels, solar hot water preheat, geothermal, cisterns, green roofs. You're looking at the south elevation, which is this articulated elevation, and then there are reflecting pools, and you're getting a sense of its scale within the residential neighborhood. So it's a 4-story building within a neighborhood that has maybe 2- and 3-story buildings. And so here you're looking at the green agenda that we had for it, the kind of the geothermal, the stormwater cisterns, an early diagram really describing the kind of intention of the project. An upper level plan where you're actually seeing the kind of, actually a lower level plan, sorry, there's an congregational meeting room, support spaces in the basement. So at the lower level, the entire complex is connected, so you can go from the Taylor House through to the main building at the service level, at the main level, and then it disconnects at the second level. So here you're actually seeing the Taylor House, and you can't get from the Taylor House to the second floor of the new building because we wanted the Taylor House to feel more like a house. It had become part of a large nursing home complex, and so we had to work to get the 1920s and 40s additions demolished and removed because they really were changing the reading of it as a house. You couldn't even tell it was a house. It looked more like a one big long brick building. And then you can see the sisters' rooms. There's a central core that's double loaded and then 2 single loaded corridors. So the sisters' rooms either look out onto the ravine or into the city and along a single loaded corridor. And here you are looking at the upper plan with the green roof of the chapel, a loading area, and again, this repetitive double-loaded, single-loaded arms. And then this is the top floor. So in section, you're actually looking at the Ravine-edge, the chapel, the single-loaded corridor. And then here again, you're seeing the chapel, the ravine, the skinny building, and then the kind of very transparent ground floor, and then the lower level below. And so here's the front entrance where you can see the Taylor House. You can see our new building. This is the main entrance to the whole complex. So the Taylor House has been restored. There are a series of meeting rooms, and the sisters use the second floor as guest bedrooms for visitors that come. and the view of the main entrance with the very open and visible lobby. And then these are second, third, and fourth floor that are all single-loaded corridors with the sisters' rooms looking onto the ravine. You're looking at the kind of articulated envelope of the building. So these are actually shaped pieces, and they're a combination of Corten steel and powder-coated aluminum. They don't actually move, but they provide a lot of the sun shading for the single-loaded corridors. Here's a view again of the entry to the project. This is a Corten steel canopy that provides the kind of weather protection. And here's that same element from above. So you can see the 3-story walk-ups in the neighborhood, the roof of the kind of canopy, and we're looking from one of the windows in the single-loaded corridor. And then a view of the chapel. And we had such a hard time with the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority. They really gave us such grief. And then last week we received a Living City Award from the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority. I couldn't believe it. So now our project is exemplary, but it took so much fighting to get there. Top of bank, plant material. We wanted fences that you didn't have to see, a chain link fence at the edge of the bank. We wanted it below the bank. So we really, just fought with them for a long time. And so I think it was worth it in the end, but they didn't need to put us through that much grief. And here's the kind of lobby itself with the kind of drop-off, and you can see from the lobby bus routes, people walking their dogs, traffic. It's actually a very energetic place in the city. And then here you're in the lobby, and there's a reflecting pool that the chapel sits in. Here is a part of the hallways on the second floor, and then a view of what we call the urban porch. These are the single-loaded corridors with the views looking out, so you can see the canopy of the roof here and the neighborhood. This is all oak-lined. This is actually a shelf both for lighting and also for all the communication wiring. And then here you can see the skinny building with the cross ventilation. So the whole building is designed not only to have operable windows on the exterior, but also the sisters have a door and a window. And so when you want natural ventilation, you really can achieve that in a building of this dimension. And then here you can see a plan. We actually built a full-size mock-up of a sister's suite in their previous monastery. And all the sisters came and commented and gave us feedback to create the actual room type. So there's a sitting room, a main part of the bedroom, a totally handicapped accessible washroom with wheel-in showers, and then a huge closet, and then heat pumps that are accessible and serviced from the hallway. And so we really worked to kind of create a kind of a room that was both really efficient, not very big, but spatially as kind of shaped as possible. And so here's a view looking back to the city. And the final space is the chapel. So here we are entering with the reflecting pools around you. And then we're at the upper level. Part of it is a private hospital, and so sisters that are infirm can come directly from their rooms into the upper level of the chapel and be part of the service. And then here we are looking at the main space, and we designed the altars and the lectern and the ambo. And then finally this kind of shape condition where, like the kind of agendas that we described at the very beginning of the lecture, this sense of the inside coming, the outside in and the inside out, and the push and pull between actually becomes part of the experience of the chapel. So when you're actually standing at the altar, you're aware of the ravine landscape, and you're also aware of the neighborhood at the same time. So these two elements that are really shaping the site are literally shaping the spaces that we work in. So I really appreciate your patience, and I hope that by sharing not only the kind of things that we're interested in at the beginning, you can actually see how we're exploring and experimenting with them in a whole range of different projects at different scales. But those themes, I think, for us resonate, and we keep thinking about them and trying to explore them in so many different ways. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Brigitte, for coming out tonight. You see, I knew I made a very wise decision asking you to be my thesis advisor. Do you have time for a few questions?
Oh, I'm happy to answer questions.
Can we open the floor to
So,
questions?
Can we get the lights up a bit so I can? Don't be shy. There's a question down here.
It's not really an architectural question, but I was just curious. It's a very expansive and beautiful building, but how much of a downsize was it for the sisters?
So the question was about how much of that it's a big, beautiful building, but how much of a downsize is it for the sisters? So the sisters' previous mother, what they call their mother house, was built for over 500 novitiates. It was completed in 1960, and it was maybe the largest kind of their entire time in Toronto. And many of those sisters are the ones that are here, the people that we worked with as part of the leadership team. And when we first met them, their mean age was 75, and now it's about 80. Many of these sisters lived to like 101. They're incredible, but also they're an aging population. And because there are no new nuns that are coming into the order, there are projections that maybe there will be no religious women in North America within the next 20 to 25 years. So it's a really interesting condition, and in a way they've spent their whole life caring for people. So part of it is that the current buildings they had did not reflect who they were. And so this new building really was about, its beginning point was not about it had to have curves, it had to do this. It was actually about their values and how they cared for each other. So the idea that your room is partly your sanctuary, and that it was not about the flashy materials in your room, it was actually the fact that in your own room you could control your own personal environment. So whether I wanted natural ventilation, someone else might actually want heating on, and someone else down the hall might actually want their cooling, air conditioning on, and that actually helps to make it a home within this larger community, and it makes it not feel like either a hospital or long-term care, because you can actually control your own environment. So in most hospitals, one thermostat controls a wing, and you're totally not capable of adjusting the temperature.
Yes,
And
this seems much more humane.
So it was really, we had to go through a lot of thinking to figure out, in effect, we met with all the sisters in different groups to really find out what was actually essential and important for them. Now it's really interesting because right now we're actually designing a place of worship for a group of Taoists. Taoism is one of the oldest religions in the world, and this group that started off in the 70s in Toronto is now going global, and they have like 60,000 members moving across the world. So it's kind of crazy that one group is diminishing but have had such impact and made such a difference, and another group, which is so young, is actually growing and expanding at a whole other rate. And it's a very peculiar time that we live in, and especially in relation to kind of sacred spaces. And it's very sort of surprising to us that we have ended up doing several sacred spaces within the body of our work that's been totally accidental, not planned at all, but fascinating to see such different groups. A synagogue, a chapel for Catholic nuns, a place of worship for Taoists. We're working with a group of First Nations, doing a sacred space for them, and each one has its own challenges, and they're so different but really interesting. Any other questions? There's one here, yeah?
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experience with the modern Toronto and the Bureau of Urbanism and
Okay,
Architecture.
yeah, okay. So
in
that.
light of ongoing challenges in modern
Sure. So in 1985, I think, there was a, I don't know if did everyone go to the CNE? There was a thing called the Boulevard Tower, the SO Tower. So it was a glass and steel tower, vitrolite at the top, an elevator, 2 exit stairs, really sweet little building. Not the most amazing building in the world, but kind of like a fairly kind of a slightly adventurous modern building in Toronto. And so I was working for George Baird at the time, and there was a plan to demolish the Boulevard Tower for a one-day IndyCar race. And we thought this wasn't so great. So a whole group of young architects, we had petitions, we got Jane Jacobs to sign our petitions, we had like big flash, like sort of spotlights around the building, and we literally tried to save this building, and had protests, all this stuff in the newspaper, and in the end, didn't really matter. Building was gone, and it took them a day to demolish the Bulova Tower. So afterwards, a group of us, Mark Baroness, Ruth Cocker, George Capellas, Detlef Mertens, and myself, decided we needed to actually change people's perception about the modern period in Toronto. And many of these buildings became very vulnerable at that time. So we said it's much easier to love your grandparents than your parents. Your parents are too close to you. You don't get to appreciate them. Whereas your grandparents you can look on so fondly. And so the grandparents were more like the Edwardian and Victorian buildings in Toronto, which everyone agreed was heritage. And in the 80s, the modern period, buildings from 45 to 65, were really persona non grata. And so what we did is we had an exhibition, a symposium, and a catalog. And we selected 10, we thought, significant modern buildings that reflected a cross-section. Everything from a Irving Grossman house that won a Massey Medal, to the Toronto Dominion Centre, to the Toronto City Hall, 1945 University of Toronto Mechanical Engineering building that was a kind of Dutch modern building. So really a great cross section. And we really tried to celebrate these buildings. And it was interesting, years later I've been the college architect for Massey College for the last 20 years, and one of the first things we did is we designated Massey College, which was one of our Toronto modern buildings, and not because it was under any threat of demolition, but because we wanted to protect it from the University of Toronto, which has a huge deferred maintenance list and all these buildings that they'll never get around to fixing, and it just elevated Massey's status to make sure that they looked after it properly. So it's really, so now there are actually many modern buildings on the list of designated buildings in Toronto, but it's still not perfect, and all these buildings are still vulnerable. It's more that there's just more awareness of it, there's more kind of understanding of what's significant about them. I was just at a panel discussion at Trent University in September where you can see that buildings need friends, and they need people to care about them. They need advocates to describe what is valuable about them and what they're contributing, because all buildings, of every period are vulnerable at different times. So, so it was a really fun project, and it was really, I think, important for all of us to put together that whole combination, and there have been other kind of versions of it in different cities, and so I think it was a kind of early beginning.
Any suggestions for those of us in the trenches?
Well, I think that the more, I guess, part of, so when we did Toronto Modern, the whole point was not to talk to architects, but to talk to non-architects. So the actual exhibition took place in the lobby of City Hall. So you were paying your tax bill and you had to walk by the exhibition. We didn't want it to be in a, quote, architectural space. We wanted it to be where the most number of people could see it. The actual symposium took place in the council chamber of the City Hall. Again, trying to really make sure that it was very accessible and open to a much larger public and not just architects. So I think that in a way, to talk to other architects, you're preaching to the converted. It's actually the larger citizens of the city that need to appreciate and understand these buildings. So I think that's really the kind of larger challenge. That's who we're really speaking to and not just each other.
Thanks.
Any other questions? You guys shy? There's one in the middle.
We end up getting away with all those exit lights hanging down from the ceiling.
They're all there.
Well, I mean, especially that building in Hong Kong that you showed.
Oh, so that one, we actually, there are some exit light. They're actually in the wall as part of an assembly. All our sprinklers are hidden up in the fins because of the actual shallowness of the building. It's not that deep, and so we could actually figure out the spread of the sprinkler heads. But we had to work really hard with all that stuff and create prototypes so that the building inspectors could see it beforehand, sign off on it before we actually installed it. Is there another question there? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.